You're good.
Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so thank you so much for coming, everybody. We are super excited about this event with our library. So we have some library faculty and staff members that are going to join us and tell us all about Wesleyan history. It should be really interesting. You'll definitely hear a few things that you may not have heard before. We have some really fun giveaways throughout the event, so make sure that you're chatting because we do have some really cool prizes for everyone. All right, if you haven't already, go ahead and enter your name and grad year in the chat so that we know that you're here. And make sure that you're chatting throughout the event, and make sure that your chat is set to all panelists and attendees. We want to make sure everybody can see it, and you definitely want to make sure your classmates can see when you're chatting to them. And if you have questions, you're more than welcome to chat them, or you can pop them in the Q&A section. That may be a little bit better option. It just depends on everybody chatting. Okay, and everybody who chats will have the opportunity to win a free t-shirt, and we'll give that away at the end of the event. It looks like this, brand new. It's one of our reunion t-shirts. Great color. So be sure to stay to the end so you can figure out if you are the winner of one of our shirts. So everybody, if you don't already know us, we are the Alumni Office. We're hosting this event with the library. My name's Christian Garcia-Womack. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations. And then we have Jerry Chipman, who is our Alumni Events Coordinator. And on her second day, we have Tiana Gageber, and she comes to us. She's from California. She used to work at California Baptist University, and we're super excited to have her. She loves working with students, and we're really excited to have her as part of our team. All right, so we are going to go ahead and meet our speakers for the night. So let's start with Nancy. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nancy Edge. I am the Special Collections Archivist at West Library. I earned my Bachelor of Arts in Maritime Studies with a minor in Anthropology from Texas A&M at Galveston. In case you're wondering what Maritime Studies is, I studied maritime culture, maritime history, ship construction, and nautical archaeology. And doing work through a senior project with museums is what led me to archives. And that is then where I knew this is what I wanted to do. So then I went and got my master's in information science from the University of North Texas. And fun fact about me is I have a copy of a sonar image of the U-boat that sank in Galveston Bay.
Awesome. Thanks, Nancy. All right, next is Louis Sherwood.
I'm Louis Sherwood. I'm the University Archivist at the West Library. I hold a BA in History from Texas Wesleyan, which I earned in May of 1989. And I have a Master's of Library Science from Texas Women's University, which I earned in December of 1994. I have worked at the West Library since February of 1990, so I've been there just a little over 31 years. If you count my student years, I have a lot more knowledge of Wesleyan history than that even. A fun fact about myself, I earned a novice license, a novice class amateur radio license in 1974 when I was 8, almost 9 years old. I had to pass a Morse code test and a radio theory test as well to earn that. And also, perhaps another fun fact, I met my wife at Wesleyan. My wife and I are both Texas Wesleyan graduates. We met working in the library as student workers.
Great, thank you, Louis. All right, next we have Risa.
All right. Yeah, I'm Risa Brown. I've been a reference librarian at Texas Wesleyan for 5 years. One of my projects since I've come there was to organize the local author events. And at one of those events, I met Perry Cockrell, who is a Texas Wesleyan alum. He wanted to do a history of Texas Wesleyan. Great, I thought. but it had already been done with that beautiful coffee table book that Louis and Betsy Alexander and Brenda Matthews did. So the only way I could do something different was to focus on the people and their stories. So I wrote Polytechnic Days about the first decade, and I'm working on a book about the second decade. And I've learned that the school's forebearers were some fascinating people. So I'm learning a lot about what it is to be a Ram.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Nancy, Louis, and Risa. We're really excited, and we are just going to go ahead and jump right in to Texas Wesleyan in 1890.
So in 1890, the various constituent conferences for the Methodist Episcopal Church South in Texas wanted to found a new college in the North Texas area. And they had a number of different propositions of land offered to them. And in August of 1890, the Reverend M.K. Little, who was one of the founders of the college, wrote that they went out on a day that was as hot as Texas could ever produce in August, and they searched around for the different parcels of land that were being offered, and they came to the plot of land that A.S. Hall, W.D. Hall, and George Tandy were offering in the far eastern part of Tarrant County. And they decided that this was the land that they wanted to found the college on. And Reverend M.K. Little drove the stake in the ground where they built Ann Waggoner Hall, which was the original college building. So in this slide, we see a picture of Arch Hall, A.S. Hall, W.D. Hall, and George Tandy, who were the donors for the land.
All right, so in 1890, December 19th, 1890 to be exact, Oliver S. Kennedy, N.A. Stedman, and H.W. Williams presented the charter for Polytechnic College to John S. Kennedy, who is a notary public in Tarrant County. And how they were able to inform the public of that is anytime anything was filed with the notary public, it was also filed with the Secretary of State in Texas. And two of the oldest newspapers in Texas are the Austin Statesman and the Galveston Daily News. And so what you have here is actually, they actually had a section specifically for anything that was filed with the notary public and the Secretary of State. And so that's what these articles are showing is the official filing and the announcements that the charter had been notarized.
So here we also have a picture of the college seal from when Polytechnic College was first founded. And you'll note that it has Polytechnic College MECS for Texas. Well, the MECS stands for Methodist Episcopal Church South, which is the branch of the Methodist Church that founded Polytechnic College. When Polytechnic College opened, it was really important that they noted that because Fort Worth University, which was another institution of higher education that was already in Fort Worth, had been founded by the Methodist Episcopal Church, which was the northern branch of the Methodist Church. So when college was marketing itself to the community, by including the MECS on their seal, that made clear to them that if they were attending a Methodist Episcopal Church South congregation themselves, that the money that they were paying in their tithes and offerings was going to actually support this school for the apportionment process. So they knew that they were sending their children to the school that they were actually supporting.
Yes, and John Atkinson was the first president of Polytechnic. He was a circuit riding preacher from Mississippi, and he had been so dedicated to his parishioners that his colleagues told him he was risking his life during the Civil War and facing violence in the area, but he just couldn't let his parishioners go without ministering. From there, once the war was over, he brought his family from Mississippi. Now, this is according to family records, and you know how family records are. But they claimed that he brought his whole family in a covered wagon over dirt roads from Mississippi to Texas. But he was committed to furthering education. So he first was the president of a college in Sulphur Springs, which I don't think is there anymore. And then he came to Polytechnic. Okay. So you'll notice that one of these is a drawing and one is a photograph. The drawing is what they used in early promotional, like advertisements and things. And I think it was a little bit pie in the sky, because the pictures that I've seen of the very first brick building didn't have the cupola on the top. It was just, you know, just a regular old roof. But it was a handsome brick building. There were two other buildings that first year on campus. They were both wooden buildings. One was a men's dormitory and one was a church. But the brick building had administrative offices, and the women's dormitory, which is where the Atkinson family lived and took care of the women. And also they had classrooms all in this one brick building. Yeah, so then the actual photograph is much later. It's probably maybe 10 years later. But yes, and this group that's gathered in front, that actually looks like the administration building because it's white. But the first building was actually a brown brick building.
Okay, so this is these articles come from relate to when Polytechnic College opened in September of 1891. The first one on the left side screen is an excerpt from page 469 of the book, A Comprehensive History of Texas, 1685 to 1897, which shows all the educational institutions in Texas in the 1890s. And of course, Polytechnic College is shown there and highlighted. And then the other is a Fort Worth Gazette article relating to the opening of the college.
Louis, we have a question. Does the library have any original floor plans of the administration building?
No, we do not. If there were any original floor plans, probably facility probably has them, but we don't. I don't even know if they would have survived though, because very early material from the early 1900s and back, we just don't have a whole lot of in the archives, honestly.
Awesome. Thank you, Louis.
Okay, so it's interesting that at first we see here actual electric streetcars, but the first maybe 5 to 7 years there was a mule-drawn streetcar system that would bring passengers from Fort Worth up the hill. But at times, passengers even had to get out and push. It was such a challenging trek to come up the hill with just mules. Apparently they didn't have that problem with electric cars, but there was a chance that they could get shocked. So they had to be really careful with those electric cars. But that was built in 1897, and it ran from downtown down Vickery Avenue, then south on Nashville Avenue, and then back to town on Rosedale Street. The line was still operating. You'll notice in the other picture, that's a picture from 1928. And that's when we were Texas Women's College. And we speculate that those are students that are standing in front of that electric streetcar.
So these are some artifacts from Polytechnic College, from the Polytechnic College era. The first one that you see on the left side of the screen is a Poly Pride drawing from the yearbook. It's probably, I think it's around 1906 or so. I don't exactly remember. And then in the middle, you see the tip of a hat pin that actually I believe belonged to Cora Maud O'Neill, who graduated from Polytechnic College in 1912. The hat that you see actually belonged to a gentleman whose name was Samuel O. Wolfgen, W-U-L-F-J-E-N is how his last name is pronounced, is spelled, I mean. I'm not sure if that is a baseball cap or literary society cap or what it is, actually, but it was part of his Polytechnic College artifacts. And he also attended around 1906 or so. And he played baseball, if my memory serves me correctly, but I'm not convinced that's a baseball hat. So I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, so the decade from 1900 to 1911 was a most optimistic one. Thanks to increased student enrollment, there was a rise in clubs and organizations. And some of those you see here. Some were related to sports. Some were related to mutual interests, such as the music clubs. But then they had a lot of clubs where people were just proud of where they came from. So the Wild West Club would have been people who were from the West. Now, I don't know what they considered being West, whether it was Mineral Wells or further west, but at any rate, all of these people were showing off the fact that they were from the Wild West. Some of the other ones, you know, there was a group for the folks from Hill Country, and there were some, you know, and so there were a wide variety of things. And they also produced a literary magazine, a newspaper, and a yearbook during this decade. So they really did feel like they were on top of their game. But that was towards the end of that decade was when the Texas Methodists began discussing the idea of a premier university in the Southwest, such as Vanderbilt, and wanted to have it located in Texas. And because Polytechnic was doing so well, it seemed that they were poised to carry this torch into the new era. But dun dun dun, you know, it didn't quite work out that way. So let's see, the next slide, maybe. Yeah, here we are. Oh no, this is, yeah, Louis. Sorry.
Okay. So as Risa said, in the beginning in the early 1900s, the Methodists began talking about creating a flagship institution in Texas like Vanderbilt. And they actually had several different choices in mind, and they were talking about it internally. One of them was Southwestern University in Georgetown, and the other was Polytechnic College. And each of them had their own advantages. Southwestern was older and more well established, but it was in Georgetown, which was extremely hard to get to at that time. Polytechnic College, on the other hand, while newer, was located in Fort Worth, which was easier to get to by rail. And it had the advantage also of being in an area that was growing rapidly, just like it is now. And so that controversy was one that remained actually within the constituent conferences of the Methodist Episcopal Church South until one day someone published a letter between Robert Heyer, who was the president of Southwestern University, and Hiram Bowes, who was the president of Polytechnic College. it was published in a newspaper, I believe. So it became a matter of public knowledge then. And of course, when that happened, it became a major public controversy. Of course, Hiram Bose wanted Polytechnic College to become that flagship school, and so he did various things to try to strengthen Polytechnic College's case. One of those was an attempt to merge with Fort Worth University, which was, as I mentioned earlier, a university that was founded by the Methodist Episcopal Church, the northern branch of the church. That school had a medical school associated with it, as well as a law school. And it was a very, well-established institution. But those efforts ultimately failed by 1910. And so Polytechnic College didn't have an opportunity to do that. And he tried other measures too, which didn't seem to help with that cause in it. See, I'm on here. Oh, yes, I'm supposed to do this one too. Sorry. So this is a panoramic view of the college campus around the later part of the 1910s. And on this image, you'll see that beginning from the left, you'll see what was then known as the Science Hall. Later, in more recent years, prior to it being torn down in 2004, that was called Mulkey Hall. The second building is the original Mulkey Hall, which was a men's dormitory. It was funded by George Mulkey, who was a trustee of Polytechnic College. The third building is the old Polytechnic College Gymnasium, which stood until 1986, when it was demolished to make way for the West Library. Then, of course, you have the administration building, which by this time, the first picture that we had shown that Risa talked about was of the administration building, the way it appeared whenever it was first constructed in 1902. But by 1909, because the college had grown so much, the administration building needed to be enlarged. So the picture that we see here is of that enlarged structure. Next to it is, on the right, is Ann Wagner Hall, which is the original college building. And at that point, by this time, it had been expanded as well to accommodate the growth in students. The original part of that building was the south wing of it, which is the original part, and then the rest of it was added on. Next to that is the Bose Benbrook Conservatory, which was where the fine arts program was housed. And then finally, next to that, we have the first really substantial building that was owned by the Polytechnic Methodist Episcopal Church South, which we would now know as Polytechnic United Methodist Church.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, so this is the formal announcement that the battle between Dallas and Fort Worth to get this premier university that was going to be the southwestern version of Vanderbilt, that battle had been won by Dallas, by Dallas leaders and church leaders. And so this very calm, orderly sort of announcement that in the Journal of the Central Texas Conference and then the formal invitation, you know, those don't make any reference to that battle at all. All they say is Polytechnic would be converted to Texas Women's College, and that, and as of this day, it was now official.
So now we skip ahead to 1912 when the Polytechnic Baptist Church was built. The picture that you see on the black and white picture you see on the right is the picture of the church building that was constructed at that time in 1912. And that building remained standing well into the point where Polytechnic Baptist Church finally closed in 1986, around 1986. The picture on the left, the black and white picture on the left, shows the newer sanctuary building, which was built around 1947, with the original building back behind it. And then, of course, the color picture is a postcard of the new Polytechnic Baptist Church's building, circa 1947. Poly Baptist was a big fixture within the Polytechnic community for quite a long time, and it had its associations with Texas Wesleyan as well. Some of our more beloved faculty members attended there, like O.D. Bounds, who was the men's golf coach for many years. He was a longtime member of Poly Baptist and was in charge of did their accounting and things. And finally, Dr. Jerry Bauckham, who served as president of Texas Wesleyan from 1984 to 1991, I believe it is. He was also a member of Poly Baptist Church. Sometime in the early 80s, Poly Baptist decided that it needed to find a bigger place to expand its fiscal plan. So that since they couldn't expand anywhere on this site because it was landlocked, they constructed a new facility way out in far east Fort Worth, out between Cooks Lane and Sandy Lane, and north of Meadowbrook Drive. And they eventually moved all of their services there around 1986. But when I was a student at Texas Wesleyan from 1984 to 1989, during the first 2 years that I was a student here, I actually attended Poly Baptist Church. But at that time, it was a very small congregation because primarily the people that were attending there were the elderly people who still lived in Polytechnic Heights. But there were some of us from the college who went there too. But by 1986, enough of those people had died out that they needed to move. And so at that time, the church closed here and became East Meadows Baptist Church out in Far East Fort Worth.
All righty. So accounts of the last graduation ceremony of Polytechnic College in 1914 that it was a rather somber affair. As far as everyone in attendance was concerned, nothing would ever be the same. But let's see, I was trying to notice on here, yes, so it has Polytechnic across the top, but then it has Southern Methodist University. So, so students who actually have this diploma were students that graduated between 1912 and 1914. And that's what their diploma said, was that it was awarded to them from, it's like Polytechnic was a branch of the Southern Methodist University. And yeah, everybody was really uncertain of what was going to happen to their college after that. .
All right, so Polytechnic College graduated its last class in June, and so then the college reopened as Texas Women's College in the fall, and even though SMU did not even open until the fall of 1915. So what we have here is we have an ex libris from the 1914 yearbook that someone drew, and it has the emblem of Texas Wesleyan College, and you can see the administration building behind the tree. I love this image. I find it very whimsical and fun. And then we have a patch from one of the scrapbooks from one of the early students. And then we also have the Texas Women College seal, which if you'll notice, it is the same as the Polytechnic seal, except for the change in the name. And so this seal was actually used from 1914 to 1930. And then here on the top right, you'll see just a booklet. It was kind of like a welcoming booklet giving you information about now Texas Women's College and Conservatory. All right, this one's me too. One of the great things about the early history in the university is the starting of these great campus traditions. And one of those was the May Fete. The May Fete was actually the most anticipated event in the spring. And eventually it ended up coinciding with homecoming, which they used that specifically for alumni in the early days. Now, the May Fete comes from the Old English May Day tradition, and there were many activities, including music, pageantry, but the most popular were the maypole, which you can see in the center picture, and then as well as the crowning of the May Queen, which is what you see in the two pictures on the top and the bottom to the left. And then the bottom center picture is the flower court, and then the picture to the right is the royal court and the rose dance.
Another tradition that began during the Texas Women's College era was the old student, new student wedding. This tradition began around 1919 during the presidency of Dr. Henry Stout. And it's recorded that Dr. Stout had said at that time that the groom was unaccustomed to wearing trousers because, of course, both the bride and the groom in that were women. So it was very unusual. This old student, new student wedding was basically to unify the student body. The freshmen represented by the bride being united into the campus community represented by the groom. And this tradition lasted, believe it or not, until around 1960. So it didn't continue on anymore after that. And there really hasn't been another tradition quite like it in that sense since then.
All right, so another tradition was the Sadie Hawkins week. It started off as a week. I think it was reduced to a day or something. But that began when Texas Wesleyan was co-ed again. Traditional events included the egg toss, which was supposedly designed to teach physics concepts. Naming an honorary Lil Abner and Daisy May. And then the entire festival ended when there was a race for the women to catch the men. The final day's festivities ended with a mock wedding by all of those couples that managed to catch or get caught, depending on your point of view. And that's the picture on the left is Marion Sam Alford, and he was the one who conducted that mock wedding ceremony. And this is apparently a caught couple in the middle, and then the beginning of the race there on your right. It was all in good fun, but this particular tradition must have ended sometime in the 60s.
Yet another tradition is the cleaning of the fish pond, which was done by the freshmen. So in the image on the left, we have them cleaning the fish pond with brooms and buckets. And then on the right, we just have, it's yet another group of freshmen who are cleaning out the fish pond. It was one of the most important of the freshman initiation traditions that took place. Some of the others that I've seen in yearbooks included the powder puff football game, which was the freshman women playing powder puff football. And I'm trying to think, I can't remember what some of the others were that I've seen, but the primary one was the cleaning of the fish pond, which was overseen by the sophomore class. Another tradition that began during the Texas Women's College era was the robing ceremony. So in this particular, on this slide, in the middle, we see, in the first two images, the one on the left and the one in the middle, both come from the TXWECO. One of them is from 1920 and the other is from 1921. And they indicate the presenting of caps and gowns to the senior girls. But it doesn't really appear to be anything quite like the robing tradition that we see today. And in 1924, the handout on April 26th recorded that the senior class of 1924 appeared for the first time in their caps and gowns during chapel on the morning of April 22nd of that year. They didn't really say anything about a robing tradition. It wasn't until 1927 when we see robing sort of like what we have today take place. And in the handout on May the 20th, 1927, they give a description of what happened. And I'll read what it says. Donning for the first time the black gowns and caps of college graduates, 36 seniors of Texas Women's College performed the first of their commencement ceremonies when they formally received their commencement robes at chapel Tuesday morning, May 17. Faculty and seniors marched to the platform of the Fine Arts Auditorium for the faculty taking their places immediately back of the seniors. President H.E. Stout gave an address congratulating the seniors upon their advent into the aristocracy of the intelligent, which reigns in every democracy. At the conclusion of his address, President Stout presented a cap and gown to Jamie Greenwald, DeLeon, president of the student body, each faculty member at the same time performing a like service for one of the other students. So that appears to be the beginning of what today is robing. And I know that, you know, for myself, and I'm sure that each of you can recall what that felt like to be robed by a faculty member when you graduated, and what a tremendously special tradition it is. And it is one that seems to be uniquely Texas Wesleyan's. I don't think there's any place else that has it. And in my case, I was robed by Dr. Margaret Apostle. And it truly was a wonderful and remarkable event, one I'll always remember. when men were readmitted to the school in 1934 in the fall, they had to begin creating social clubs for them. One of the earliest the men's social clubs was the Sons of Sakara, which was founded in 1934. And here we see on the left the emblem for the Sons of Sakara. And on the right is a card related to the Sons of Sakara. And in the middle we see an image of one of the many balls and other social events that the Sons of Sakara held over the years. Sons of Sakara was one of the first clubs and lasted about the longest of any of them. And one of the long-standing sponsor of Sons of Sakara was Dr. H. Howard Hughes, who was a professor of English, who retired in 1968. Sorry.
We're going to take a quick break and do a little trivia. Over the years, there were some celebrities who visited the Wesleyan campus, and all but one of these celebs at one time or another made an appearance at Wesleyan. So in the chat, if you think you know which one did not ever come to Wesleyan, put your guesses in the chat and we'll give you a prize. You'll get this lovely travel mug of Wesleyan travel mug. So we've got Agnes Moorehead, Ray Bradbury, Lily Tomlin, Henry Winkler, or Jim Croce. So I see some answers coming in. We've got a lot of correct ones. Okay, go ahead, Christian, to the next slide. The answer, of course, is Henry Winkler. The Fonz did not ever make it to Wesleyan, but these other celebs did. Jim Croce did a concert, Lily Tomlin, of course, Ray Bradbury was there in the 90s and spoke, which was exciting. And so really some very, very interesting celebs to grace Wesleyan's social scene. So congratulations. I think I saw Scott Cannon get their first right answer. Yes, Scott Cannon, you get a travel mug. So Scott will be sending you a mug. Good job.
Okay, so now we're to 1935. In 1935, at its spring meeting, the Board of Trustees decided, well, it was on March the 20th, 1935, actually. The Board of Trustees voted unanimously to change the name of Texas Women's College to Texas Wesleyan College, to make the college coeducational, and to make the change effective immediately. This change, the motion to make these changes was made by Mrs. L.M. Hogsett, who was the only woman on the board at that time, and it was seconded by Marvin D. Evans, an ex-student of Polytechnic College. Throughout the 1930s, the president of Polytechnic College, Texas Women's College, who at that time was Tom Bradlam, had worked to try to help raise money for the college, and he had great difficulty doing that. And it seemed that everything he tried just didn't work. And finally, the decision was made to readmit men beginning in the fall of 1934. And that proved to be helpful to the college. And so that permanently, that change became more permanent, with the change of the name to Texas Wesleyan College. Here we have on the screen, we have on the left an image of the college seal, and it's on the cape worn by the May Queen during the May Fete. This is probably from the late 50s. And in the middle at the top, you see the headline from the handout when Texas Women's College became Texas Wesleyan College. And then at the bottom, in the Rambler from sometime later, we see the image "We Got Sown." It's around this time that Dr. Law Sohn became president of Texas Wesleyan College, and that proved to be a very momentous occasion for the college. Dr. Sohn served the longest of anyone as president of Texas Wesleyan. He served for well over 30 years, for a little over 30 years. And during his tenure, the college expanded rapidly, and many buildings were built. His was a presidency of great consequence. And on the right-hand side of the screen, we see the seal for Texas Wesleyan College, which again looks very similar to the other seals, with the addition of the administration building that's in the middle of that seal.
So in 1936, a great thing happened for our Polytechnic community, and the current Polytechnic High School was constructed. One really neat thing about it is that it was designed by Joseph Roman Pellick, who he did work for TCU, and he was the president of the Fort Worth American Institute of Architects. And he was also the first architect to receive the Texas Restoration Award for his work on the birthplace of Dwight Eisenhower in Denison. How it also relates to Wesleyan was that he was a patron and a supporter of the college. And as prolific as an architect as he was, he also designed some buildings for TCU and Casa Manana, as well as several neighborhood buildings in the area, including Berkeley, Mistletoe, Arlington Heights, and Westover Hills. There's actually not very many pictures of him out there. So what you see here is on the right at the top is his picture when he was in the Army during the war. And then on the bottom, for the war picture, he's actually the individual on the far left. And then the picture in the bottom is his yearbook photo from Cornell. And you can see him, he's on the bottom row, and he is the second one on the left side.
All right, so wartime. The students at Texas Wesleyan always showed support for troops that were serving in the military. Even in World War I took place when the college was Texas Women's College, but they organized many service projects and did fundraisers and sewing and all of those kinds of projects that went on during World War I. But during World War II, or at least as things began to look more and more certain that we were going to be entering the war, there was actually students could take pilot training courses at Texas Wesleyan, and it would qualify them to be reserve pilots. The minimum age for that was 18, but eventually there was some talk about allowing men as young as 17 to participate in these classes. So yeah, then they would be qualified to be a reservist, and I'm sure find a place in the military as a pilot.
Okay. So in 1938, the Rambler began the tradition of awarding the Golden Shears. At first, when they were doing the awarding them, they called it Today We Commend. But then later, they called it the Golden Shears. And the first awardee was Mrs. Nora Yeager, who was a member of the Rambler staff. Mrs. Yeager was the one who designed the pin for the Golden Shears, which you see the emblem, which became the pin, here on the left side of your screen on the top. And in fact, on the bottom, you see a pair of shears there. In the middle, we have the charter for the Golden Shears, which actually dates back into the 70s. I guess as the student government decided that it needed to definitely have a charter and didn't have one at the time. On the right side of the screen, we have pictures of the Golden Shears Executive Committee, and let's see. One of them is also a photo of a Golden Shears breakfast. That would be at the top.
All right, so one of the great things that happened in 1955 is we had our first spring musical. So this was actually a collaboration between three different departments: the art department, the music, and the theater departments. And the first spring musical was Finian's Rainbow. It was actually a Broadway award-winning and Tony award-winning musical in 1947, and it had 725 performances. And it also won a Theater World Award. So it's really cool that we had such an amazing award-winning musical as our first musical. So here what you see on the left side is the poster for Finian's Rainbow. Here in the middle, we have a cast picture of Clifford Corley, who played Og the Leprechaun. So he's the one standing like this. And then we also have Joanne Scholes, who played Sharon McLongren, who played Finian's daughter. And then we also have Les Handy, who played Woody, who is the union leader of the sharecroppers and Sharon's love interest. And then we have at the bottom right, a wonderful picture of Mason Johnson, who helped lead the theater department for many, many years. And we actually used that photo as inspiration for the logo for the Mason Johnson Theater Collection. And so all these items are actually from the Mason Johnson Theater Collection, which are all available on our digital archives. And then another really cool thing at the top right part of your screen is actually the billing statement or the expense report on what it took and what it cost to produce the show.
By the mid-1950s, Texas Wesleyan College was in need of new dormitories because the college's enrollment had increased. And other buildings as well. So we also needed a new cafeteria and we needed a new library. So here we have a picture of the architect's rendering, which was created by Wyatt C. Hedrick, who was a very well-known Fort Worth area architect. It's showing the Elizabeth Means Armstrong Hall on the left, Dora Roberts Cafeteria in the middle, and O.C. Armstrong Hall on the right. When the school began raising money for all of its new capital needs, O.C. Armstrong, who was one of the trustees at the time, came to Dr. Sohn and he said to him that he wanted to pledge a certain amount of money. And then he went on to say that it was going to be a recurring gift over a certain amount of time. And so that money was used to build the 2 dormitories.
Another building that was built at that same time, in addition to the dormitories, they also needed a dining hall. So Dora Roberts Dining Hall was built in 1956, again renovated in 1981, and again in 2014. Dora Roberts of Big Spring was the one who donated the funds. So we have a picture of the hall, an article of when it was finished. Then we have students dining. Oh, those are students. Okay, dining in Dora's, very, very dressed up, don't you think? And then students walking away from the dining hall. So that was another building that was built in that era.
All right, so then the next building was the George W. Armstrong Library, and it was built in 1957, and it was the first building on campus that was solely dedicated to library services. And George W. Armstrong of Natchez, Mississippi, was the son of Reverend Ramsey Clark Armstrong, one of the first members of the Polytechnic College Board of Trustees. And after the current library opened, this building was converted to the home of the School of Business. So now it's the Armstrong Mabee Business Building. And so on the left, you see just a program for the dedication, and then an actual picture of our wonderful building. And then you have the Armstrongs going over some of the blueprints and construction plans while it's being built. And then to the right, you have Dr. Law Sloan and Leslie Ray Jenkins at the groundbreaking. And Leslie Ray was the daughter of Ray and Joanne Jenkins.
Okay, the picture from the previous slide that was down at the bottom was actually of Elizabeth and O.C. Armstrong looking at plans for their dorms. And here we have a picture of the Armstrongs on the right side of the screen. At the bottom of the screen, you have a picture of George W. Armstrong, who was the namesake for the library. So the image at the top, of course, is of the new Elizabeth Means Armstrong Hall. And then the image at the bottom is of the O.C. Armstrong Hall. Interestingly enough, when the buildings opened, only the Elizabeth Means Armstrong Hall was named. The other one was just called Men's Hall. I'm not quite sure why that was the case. I never have been able to figure that out. But that was true. But later, the other one was named for him. Interestingly enough, Elizabeth Means Armstrong actually went to Texas Woman's College. She took classes in the School of Fine Arts for a period of time. And I think O.C. Armstrong also went to Polytechnic College briefly, but I'm not exactly sure about how long. I don't think he graduated. But so they had ties to the school, and of course they were faithful Methodists, so even if they hadn't been, they would have had a great interest in this school. Another new building that came about during the Sohn years was the new science building, which nowadays we call the McFadden Science Center. And here we have in the middle a picture of the cover of the program from the groundbreaking ceremony. and you'll see that it says the Arnold L. Reed Science Center. Well, Arnold L. Reed, who is in the picture on the left, he's standing on the left side of that picture, and his wife is in the middle. He was an insurance executive from Dallas. And he pledged to money to support the construction of the building. I'm not quite sure why, but somehow that apparently never came to completion. And so later his remain was removed from the building, and it remained unnamed. It just was called the Science Center for a very long time. And then eventually it was named for Ella McFadden. Ella McFadden was a trustee of Texas Wesleyan College during the early 60s. She died, well, 50s into the early 60s. She died in 1963, and her nephew, Gilbert McFadden Weaver, then took her seat on the Board of Trustees and served for a very long time. Her family had a trust that gave to many different causes, Texas Wesleyan being one of the big ones. And it finally, when it finally doled out the remainder of the trust, Wesleyan received a very large part of it. And so this building was named for her. The other pictures that you see here are from the groundbreaking, showing the unveiling of the architect's rendering. And then on the lower right, you see them actually breaking the ground to begin construction of the building.
The very next year, Stella Russell Hall was opened, and it's a co-ed resident hall for 150 students. It includes a large living room, a guest room, student facilities, recreation and laundry rooms, and a sun deck. Stella Russell herself was from Houston, so you see her in the groundbreaking picture in the middle, and then there are other groundbreaking pictures. Then the hall is pictured down there at the bottom of the page.
I might add that Stella Russell was actually also attended Texas Women's College briefly. She was also a fine arts student.
Okay, we have another quick prize for you. We have some famous alums and some people who have made history. So of all of these choices, one of them is not an Texas Wes alumni. Best-selling author Tom Huff, U.S. Congressman Mark Vesey, an anime actress Jade Saxton, the inventor of Kool-Aid Edward Perkins, or the professional wrestler The Undertaker. Which one is not a Texas Wes alum? Anyone know?
Scott, you can't win again.
I know, Scott cannot win again. That is for sure. People are saying you got it right. The Kool-Aid inventor, Edwin Perkins, did not go to Texas Wesleyan. So everyone, all these other famous faces did. So I think I'm trying to see who maybe our first winner was. Was it Brian Bilta? Brian Bilta, congratulations. You're the proud owner of this coffee table book for Texas Wesleyan.
Okay, so in 1972, a lot of the social clubs on campus began to go national and join up with national Greek societies. Sakara was the first one. It became a colony of Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity. And then many of the others followed suit. On the left side of your screen, you see the symbols for a number of the different social clubs that were active on campus. We have on the top left, Altoco and its sister organization, Autis. ALTOCO actually is an abbreviation. It stood for Always Loyal to Our College. And AUTUS was an abbreviation for Always Upholding the Ideal School Spirit. SACARA and those two were brother and sister organizations. And then SACARA and DECA were also brother and sister organizations. And then DD, or Lotus Duodecum, and the reason it was called DD was because their nickname was Dirty Dozen. And then their sister organization was Entre Amis, which means between friends. And at the top, on the right-hand side of your screen, you see a picture of some of the pledges from DECA and SACARA. It's from the 50s. I'm not sure when. In the bottom of the screen, in the center, is a picture of a tug-of-war match during the Greek Week. This is from sometime in the 80s. I think probably around 1983 or so. I don't remember exactly. And then on the right side is a picture of the Lambda Chi Alpha Toga Party. It was probably, I think, about 1984 or so.
All right, so during the 70s, it became very apparent that the college needed a new student union building. So in the new master plan in 1979, it called for the erection of a new 20,000 square foot student center. And then ground was broken on the building in 1980, and it was opened and dedicated December 1st of 1981. And it's a two-story building, and it's located on the east end of the campus, adjacent to the Sid Richardson Physical Education Building. And it includes full service snack bar and grill, and a soda fountain, and a balcony with seating. And then one of the most prominent features was that it had a TV lounge featuring a color TV and vending machines, a game room, and the college bookstore.
All right, so the West Library, there is no East Library, was named for Eunice and James L. West, and it was opened in 1988. It is the tallest building on campus. There are 84,400 square feet of awesomeness. Besides the library and special collections, there are many offices, classrooms, I lost my place. Technology-enabled areas, and the newest addition, the Makers Lab, is located there. So in our pictures, we have, of course, images of the library being built. The Wests are there in the middle at the top. The inauguration ceremony, Ross Perot spoke at that. So you'll see a picture of him amongst all the dignitaries there in front of the building. And then we have our seal from our anniversary year. Is that what it is? I can't see it all, but anyway, yeah, so there we are, the West Library, our home. We love it.
So in 1989, Texas Wesleyan decided to change its name from TWC, or from Texas Wesleyan College, to Texas Wesleyan University. In the middle, or on the right-hand side, you'll see a picture of the Rambler stating, that this change was going to take place in January of 1989. And you see there, accompanying it, a picture of the news conference that was held to announce the name change. And here it's duplicated here at the bottom of the screen in the middle. And at the top, just above that thing, you see an emblem for the centennial of Texas Wesleyan, which took place in the early 90s, in 1990. And you'll see that it has an image of the library on it. once the library was built, they changed the seal to feature the library because it was the newest building on campus, and it was the most impressive building, I guess. And so this change was one that was met with some degree of, it was welcomed, but it was, I can't think of the right words to use. It was one that some were perplexed why we would choose to take that name, but most everybody welcomed it. It was a good thing. It gave us more prestige.
All right, as someone already mentioned in the chat, in 1992, we had former President Jimmy Carter visit the campus because he gave the keynote speech at Jake Schrumm's inauguration. And Carter had actually met Schrumm from their time at Emory University, and Schrumm was the vice president there before coming to Wesleyan. And Carter became a professor after leaving the office in 1982, and he founded the Carter Center there after his presidency. And what's really some kind of neat things that the Rambler mentioned about Carter's speech was that he addressed several environmental and humanitarian issues, and then he talked about, you know, his volunteering efforts and how it's important to give back to the community, and that he further mentioned that it was a wise choice that was made that Texas Wesleyan University decided to stay in the Polytechnic area. And everyone was thrilled with the speech.
Okay, so now we're moving into the 2000s. So after Harold Jeffcoat became president of Texas Wesleyan University in 2001, we began having a need to build more buildings on campus. And one of the programs that really needed a new facility was the graduate program of nurse anesthesia. Texas Wesleyan began offering the nurse anesthesia program either in the late 70s or early 80s. At first, it was done in conjunction with Harris Hospital, and then we began doing it specifically on our own. And so this new building was constructed in 2003 to house them. And it included a very large lecture hall, and as well as a simulation lab. It was a much needed addition, and one that everybody was thrilled by. And here you see two different images of that building.
All right, so in 2006, one of the great highlights of that year was we won the National Basketball Championship. It was against Oklahoma City University, and we won 67-65. And we won thanks to Ben Hutt scoring the winning three-point shot with 0.2 of a second left on the clock. So here you can see the images of the winning shot, and then of our Rams being proud of their win there in the center, and then to the right, the actual score from the scoreboard.
In 2007, the campus opened 2 new buildings. The Ed and Ray Schulmeyer Science and Technology Center is a 7,000 square foot building housing technology-intensive classrooms and faculty offices. The Llewellyn Baker Martin Pavilion is a 3,500 square foot banquet facility located adjacent to the Baker Martin House, affectionately now known as, this is right, yes? As Lou's Place? Is this Lou's Place now? Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, so we have exteriors of the buildings as well as some of the dignitaries. Let me see if I can see who some of these people are. Lou's gonna get your help here because I'm not sure I know who these people are.
So on the top left side of the screen, we have a picture of Lou Baker Martin and her husband Nicholas Martin.
Okay.
And on the right-hand side of your screen at the bottom, on the right, you have a picture of Ed Schulmeyer, and his wife Ray is in the middle.
Cool. Yeah.
So after Dr. Jeffcoat resigned from the presidency of Texas Wesleyan, we did a national search. And in the fall of 2010, it was announced that Frederick G. Slaybaugh was going to become president of Texas Wesleyan University. And that happened at the end of the dedication of the Morton Fitness Center. And here we have pictures from his inauguration, which took place in January of 2012. The guest speaker for that event was Madeleine Albright, the former Secretary of State under, I can't remember which president she served. I believe it was Obama, but I'm not sure. I can't remember. I'm embarrassed by that. So in the middle at the top, we have a picture of President Slaybaugh with Secretary Albright. And this was during a Q&A session that she did prior to the inauguration ceremony, in which he asked her some questions about her service as Secretary of State and about other things that she was doing, and she answered. And she also took questions from the students and other people who were in attendance. And afterwards, she signed copies of her books. And the library has a number of those books that she signed for us in the archives. On the bottom left side of your screen is a picture of President Slaybaugh presenting Secretary Albright with an honorary degree. And then, of course, on the other side, on the right side, is President Slaybaugh and Secretary Albright during the inauguration ceremony.
As someone pointed out in the chat, Secretary of State Albright served under Bill Clinton. And another fun fact was 5 months after former President Carter came and spoke on the campus, George Bush and Bill Clinton had a debate on the campus. So that's a really cool fun fact. But back to the timeline. In 2019, we had our newest building on campus opened and dedicated, and that is our lovely Martin University Center. So I'm sure if any of you attended, you remember Willie coming riding in on the horse. That was very fun and exciting. And then we also, and obviously this was made possible thanks to the generous donations of Luella and Nicholas Baker, well, Baker Martin and Nicholas Baker. And so here on some of the other photos that you see is the dedication invitation. And then on the lower left is actually the cutting of the ribbon. And then we also have the artist rendering of what the University Center was going to look like and what it does look like on campus before it was built.
All right, we have a really fun video to show you all. Thanks for staying. We are going to look at the evolution of Willie and Wilma. We hope y'all enjoyed that. That was so fun. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We were so excited to share this with you all. The library faculty and staff did a great job. I think everybody learned something. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to email our library staff anytime. We ask them regularly information. I email Louis a lot, and I'm like, can you tell me what happened in 1972? And he'll get back with me. But if you ever have any questions, let us know, or you can email them directly, because we do love sharing our heritage and history and where we came from. So I just wanted to do a quick plug. Our upcoming events, we are having our virtual Alumni Reunion Week. Yes, a full week of virtual events. We won't be in person this year, but that's okay. We have some really fun stuff planned, April 17th through 24th. It starts with a paint night, virtual paint night. We'll send you the supplies, and we have some other fun stuff throughout that week. And then we do have the musical, just like we always will, on the Saturday of reunion. There is an option for it to be in person or virtual. You can stream the musical or come in person, but in-person tickets are going pretty fast. So if you're interested, please register online. You can go to TXWES.edu/reunion and see all about our events and what we have planned for you, and register online from that link. Also, of course, follow us on Instagram and Facebook so you can keep up with what we're doing as an alumni office and as a university. And we are so thankful that you joined us tonight. And go ahead and say thank you again to our library faculty and staff. They did a really great job. We hope to see you all soon, and have a wonderful evening.